With Halloween right around the corner, typically I end up going through some of my back catalog of survival horror games, some that I never started, some that I halfway completed, and some that I just wanted to replay over again. And this year, my focus is going to be some of the Silent Hill titles. I've been playing through Homecoming. I've also been playing through Silent Hill 3 again, and I'm going to start Silent Hill 4 shortly as well. And one of the things that stuck out to me with those titles and the Silent Hill franchise in general is that I believe one of the biggest things that's holding it back are some of the earlier titles' plot threads that they continuously bring back into some of the newer iterations that they've tasked either Western developers with or even what Konami decided to take that direction into. And in this video, I'm going to go over why some of those plot elements are ultimately the nail in the Silent Hill coffin and why, unfortunately, I think it's held back the series overall. So let's take a look. I feel like when it comes to Silent Hill, there's two camps. And the first camp really appreciates the foundation of Silent Hill 1 and enjoys the cult story that surrounds it, and also appreciated how Silent Hill 3 brought that together, and Silent Hill 4 kind of evolved with that plot thread. And then I feel like there's another camp, which is more or less the camp that I sit in, where Silent Hill 2 kind of ignored all of that and built its own self-contained world around a lot of the principles and a lot of the facets of the previous Silent Hill game, and really came into its own psychological horror. And I think as a result, that camp is pretty distinct. And what I mean is, I myself didn't really get the hype for Silent Hill 3. Even to this point, having playing through it again, I truly don't necessarily understand it. I think the whole cult plot points, in my opinion, are very cheesy and oftentimes detract from some of the really cool things that Silent Hill 3 does do. And I think it oftentimes takes away from the psychological horror of that game and even some of the further entries in that series, because it kind of focuses on trying too hard to tie those plot points up as opposed to capitalizing on the disturbing and surreal nature of what they were able to do in Silent Hill 2. Now, I know for some fans I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, but I believe that this whole emphasis on the cult kind of came to a head when we saw the Silent Hill movie released, and you ended up having a bunch of new fans who kind of decided that this is what they wanted out of the series. And my impression is that Konami responded back by investing in Western developers who are going to continuously milk that for the series. And what I mean is, you get into some of the Western developed titles like Origins or Homecoming, and those games ultimately are focused heavily on the Silent Hill cult and the origins of the cult, and basically how these different characters within that cult have caused all this irreversible harm to the townships that you're in, like Shepherd's Glen or Silent Hill itself. And I think ultimately, when you kind of look at it from how they've structured those games, and you have to understand, like Homecoming, for example, as I understand, if you look at some of the development history, that storyline was put in place by Konami. That wasn't Western developers who capitalized or decided to just take that story and run with it. That's something that Konami told them they had to follow. And so ultimately, you have a series that keeps revisiting tired and almost boring plot points. And I'm aware that, you have the Resident Evil franchise, which has basically went in a billion different directions in terms of its plot lines. But I felt like oftentimes, with the exception of a few large missteps, Capcom listened to their fans and kept most of these storylines feeling fresh. Whereas with the Silent Hill franchise, it feels like Konami and the Western developers they task with creating these new entries are continuously trying to answer back to that fan service, and ultimately they're starting to feel more like fan games than they are actual entries in the Silent Hill series. And to me, that's ultimately what has killed a lot of Silent Hill for myself, because I'm not sure that the foundation of this whole evil cult doing satanic rituals is something that I find necessarily interesting. And I know I'm not alone in that assessment, and there's probably a reason why Capcom finally realized that remaking Silent Hill 2 made more sense than any of the other titles in that franchise, because ultimately it was different. And even looking at what's on the horizon from the Silent Hill franchise, and I made a video a couple months back how I believe that franchise is pretty much dead at this junction, Townfall looks like it's most likely going to take those sorts of plot threads and kind of do more of the same like a Homecoming did or an Origins did. And in my opinion, that's not going to be that exciting. And I'm only basing that off of the hidden messages that were in that Townfall trailer that we ended up hearing that suggested that, you know, there's something gone wrong, which I'm assuming is going to be the result of the cult. Now, again, this is complete speculation, but this is just my impression of what's most likely going to happen with that. And further to that, you even see Silent Hill F. I'm not sure that it's going to be more of that, but there's a strong chance, based off of Konami's track record, that they're going to try to milk this fan service that they've been doing for so long that, again, I'm afraid it's probably just going to hold that title back, which to me has killed my excitement. Because you have to understand, I think, in my opinion, the best balance Konami found with kind of answering that cult aspect that some fans have come to expect, I guess, but also keep with the psychological horror and the disturbing nature in a very good way, was Silent Hill 4. And from my impression of the way Konami's treated the series since, they didn't necessarily consider that a flagship title in that franchise, and as a result, they went a complete different direction by tasking Western developers with a franchise that, unfortunately, a lot of them haven't really done a good job of handling, and as a result, just pandered to a lot of the cult storyline fan service that people have started to come to expect from Silent Hill, which to me is, again, something that it seemed like Team Silent was trying to go against. And as I understand, Silent Hill 3, they were trying not to do the whole cult plot line again. They wanted to go into something fresh and new, and unfortunately that's not what they did, and that's not where the franchise ended up. And as a result, we have a lot of lackluster Silent Hill games that have come since that. From playing through Homecoming again and playing through Silent Hill 3 again, I felt like it held those titles back. It didn't really add much interest into the world, and to be honest, I didn't find it interesting enough that I wanted to learn more about the cult that was surrounding Silent Hill. And I was more interested in some of the more disturbing elements that, you know, kind of were a result of the cult, but didn't necessarily involve them directly, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, in Silent Hill 3, you see a lot of very disturbing, otherworldly imagery, which you've come to expect from Silent Hill, but once it gets back into the cult plot points and the different characters affected by the cult, it ultimately kind of just took me out of the game again, and I was like, oh, this is just kind of a cheesy horror title at this point. And I think my feeling about the franchise is that that's actually the nail in the coffin. I think that Team Silent being pigeonholed into going back into focusing on this cult plot line from the first game and extending it into the third, and then kind of using that to round out the fourth, actually did more harm than good for the series. And it would be really awesome, in my opinion, if we had a clean slate with some of those original developers, which Konami kind of teased, but then again ultimately messed up again with Ascension and some of the other recent releases that we've seen from that franchise. So this is more or less just kind of my thoughts after revisiting some of the older Silent Hills and kind of thinking to myself, where did this go wrong? And in my opinion, the cult plot lines really are what killed that franchise for me.